Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this post from Olympic gold medalist from France, Estelle Mossely, who stated, "A new phase of my life is being written. Qualified for the Olympics in Paris today, heading to my destiny tomorrow. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for your messages and congratulations. This is going to be quite an adventure. A year raced by great times. Looking forward to sharing all of this with you. Behind the scenes, I'll be working hard, and in front of you, I'll make sure to shine the best I can." My assessment of Estelle Mossely as a professional is that she is in fact a professional amateur who moonlights as a pro, who moonlights as a pro boxer. I can't say that since Estelle debuted as a professional in 2018 that she's lived up to my expectations. She was a highly touted amateur, a blue chip prospect that turned pro, that won the gold in the Olympics opposite her then beau, Tony Yoka. They have since divorced. Yeah, they're not together anymore. They used to be married. As amateurs, they won the gold in the same games alongside each other. It was a bit of a fairy tale, but fairy tales, as we all know, they're not real. And, they went through their divorce. Estelle Mossely, she didn't live up to my expectations, and she still isn't. You hear it all the time, that the amateurs and the pros are different beasts, and that not every amateur has what it takes to make an elite-level pro. I think about a fighter like Caroline Dubois, who didn't win the gold in the Olympics, but who I'd favor heavily to beat Estelle in the pros, that maybe Estelle was a better amateur than Caroline Dubois was, because Estelle got the gold. But in the pros, Caroline would clean her clock.
She'd kick her ass.
I think she would. And Estelle Mossely has not been as ambitious as a pro boxer as she has been as an amateur, that maybe she has mastered the art of the 3-round fight. The glaring difference between the Amis and the pros, that in the Amis, you're only boxing for 3 rounds.
It's not like a pro fight to where maybe you get off to a good start, but you start to fade down the stretch. Maybe in round 5 and round 6, the damage starts to set in, and you've got to dig deep.
I can't say that we've seen that from Estelle Mossely. I can't say that she's been as ambitious as a pro boxer as she is as an amateur, having last seen action in April of this year. She fought 2 times this year and only once last year, only once the year before that.
The resume's not bad.
She gave Lucy Wildheart her first professional loss, the same Lucy Wildheart that recently shared the ring with Michaela Mayer. She fought Yanina Lascano, a durable fighter, durable Argentinian slugger.
Estelle's resume isn't bad, but it isn't great either. And from an Olympic gold medalist, that is what you expect. You expect greatness. When Katie Taylor and Clarissa Shields, those Olympic gold medalists, when they debuted as pros, expectations were high, but they met them.
I very much feel like both Katie Taylor and Clarissa Shields lived up to the expectations people had when they first debuted. But Estelle, campaigning in the women's lightweight division, where Katie Taylor currently reigns as that division's undisputed champion. Katie Taylor, who to a lot of people seems to be approaching the end of her career. If Katie comes and goes with Estelle not having tried to fight her, what does that really say?
Katie Taylor debuted as a professional in 2016, 2 years before Estelle, and they seem to be in very, very, very different places in their careers. Think about all the fights that Katie Taylor has had, and remind yourself that Estelle has been around for most of that.
Having never won a full alphabet title in the pros, a legitimate title. She's had the IBO title, but that's not recognized by the Major Four.
She's older than Caroline Dubois, who campaigns as a lightweight now. You figure that if Estelle does what she does, whatever she does in the amateurs, and she returns to the pros, a fighter like Caroline Dubois, by the time she comes back, will have become even more dangerous.
Fighters like Caroline Dubois, Brazil's own Beatriz Ferreira, an amateur standout just like Caroline, champions, undisputed champion, Alicia Baumgartner, who beyond her next fight, maybe she moves up to lightweight. Michaela Mayer's already there.
You see the type of talent pool that's at or around these weights that some of these fighters have actually already fought each other, and that Estelle Mossely has been the wallflower, that she hasn't fought any of these fighters.
But how many fighters Katie Taylor has fought? Chantel Cameron, Alicia Baumgartner, Michaela Mayer, and that Estelle, being an Olympic gold medalist, hasn't fought a single one of them, a single one among them, and now she's back to the amateurs. It says it all, really.
Tells me that she's a professional amateur that merely moonlights as a pro boxer.
She doesn't take her pro boxing career as seriously as her amateur one, and, that'll be the story.
That's the look of it.
Men's junior middleweight news, the latest on what is intended to be the Tszyu versus Jermell Charlo undisputed fight. According to George Rose, who handles the career of Tszyu, the fight will be in the United States. We've actually agreed on the date. It's just a timing issue now for their side to make the announcement.
I'm still not getting my hopes up. I'm still pessimistic because this isn't the first time that they had a fight date locked in,
They had all of these particulars, all of these details sorted at the beginning of this year. All of this was already figured out, but Jermell Charlo was reported to have suffered that injury, and here we are. The silver lining for Tszyu is that he's already seen action 2 times this calendar year alone, whereas Jermell...
A lot can go wrong between now and the fall. There's a lot that can go wrong between now and October when this fight is tabbed to be taking place, and that's a long time.
It is.
A very long time for Jermell to have not seen action.
Stylistically, at least when this fight was first talked about, when it first became a discussion, I favored Jermell to win it because he has the right base style for the job. Jermell Charlo is a boxer-puncher, whereas Tszyu is more of a pressure fighter, a volume puncher, and an aggressive one. You don't want to go standing in front of Jermell Charlo letting the fists fly unless you want to end up like Brian Castano did in the rematch.
He put up a great fight in the first fight, and he flustered Jermell Charlo in the first fight. He even rattled him.
Yeah.
He even wobbled him, but in the second one...
Jermell Charlo made a slight adjustment, tweaked things, was able to time Brian Castano's entry. Brian Castano, who much like Tszyu, he's a pressure fighter. He's a volume puncher.
A few slight differences aside, they have the same base style. I think Tim is more the sharpshooter than Brian Castano is as far as pressure fighters go. Tim does do more punch picking, better punch picking than Brian.
I feel like Tim is a little bit more accurate, whereas Brian's a little bit more busy. He's the kind of pressure guy that throws punches for the sake of throwing punches, whether they get in or not.
I think that is what separates them.
But the dichotomy is the same. The dichotomy between Brian Castano and Jermell Charlo, and the dichotomy between Tszyu and Jermell Charlo, that it is pressure fighter versus boxer puncher. The stylistic matchup is the same.
Based on styles and experience, Jermell has the edge, at least in those departments.
Not in activity, and that's worrying. You don't go into a fight with a physical fighter, a rough and tumble fighter. You don't go into a fight with a fighter that's going to push you physically off this kind of a layoff. You're talking about a layoff that's close to 2 years.
It will be.
Last time Jermell Charlo saw action was in May of last year. He won't see action until October of this one. It's already been a year. May marked a year.
October's closer to 2.
Keep hearing people talking about Jermell's inactivity. What is the relevance of inactivity? How does that affect a fighter? Well, you saw in the Brian Castano rematch that Jermell was able to effectively time Brian,
Snipe him.
moving lateral, setting traps. He was sharp.
Hard to say that a fighter's going to be sharp when he's been out of action this long.
He's facing a physical fighter in Tszyu the same way he faced the physical fighter in Brian Castano, with the difference being that Jermell's been out of commission for a while now, and he's said to be coming off an injury.
That's less than ideal.
A unique situation to where a fighter has some of the right ingredients, the right base style, and the right level of experience, but he's been out too long. That makes the fight closer.
You haven't had to make the weight in a while, been punched in the face in a while.
I mean, I'm still skeptical. I am still pessimistic because it's not like this is the first time that they had all the details sorted. All the details, the fight date, the location, all that stuff was already sorted earlier this year, and in spite of that, the fight still got pushed back. It's a long ways out in the sport of boxing between now and October. Things could still fall apart, and even if they don't, this is less than ideal for Jermell.
But that's what the story is. That's the news.
That's the news. The major details are already sorted. George Rose and Tszyu are just waiting for the people on the PBC end to make an official announcement.
We about to see all those alphabet titles change hands. How do you feel? Do you feel that under these circumstances, Jermell can stay undisputed?
Do you feel that this fight is even going to happen? Because there's a chance that it doesn't.
Tim's got all the momentum.
We'll see if it happens, but that's the latest Upstairs at super middleweight, reigning undisputed super middleweight champion Canelo Alvarez posted this to his social media saying, "Looks like it's Canelo versus everybody." I love it.
Y'all know what the news is.
Though some are still trying to find reasons to continually criticize Canelo Alvarez when, in going to the PBC and signing that multi-fight deal, at least in theory, he should be satisfying what many people have wanted of him. But as you can imagine, when you compete at the level of a Canelo Alvarez and you're as successful as Canelo Alvarez, there's always going to be a small group of people you can't do nothing right for. Now that he's at the PBC, people are criticizing, at least some.
They're criticizing him for not fighting Dmitry Bivol.
The ones not criticizing him for not fighting Dmitry Bivol are criticizing him for not fighting David Benavidez next. They're criticizing him for fighting Charlo Charlo, who he's supposed to be fighting on September 30th.
I think he's going to stop Jamal.
Charlo, who's been out of action even longer than his brother, who we just talked about, where Jamal's been out of action for a little over a year. Jamal's been out of action for a little over 2 years, reportedly having suffered mental health issues.
And the back injury, didn't they say he had something like a back injury or something like that?
That's what they said, but if these are the circumstances, if all this is working against Jamal, then why is he even taking this fight without a warm-up fight in between? Why doesn't he take a tune-up fight?
He didn't want to.
Let me tell you one fucking thing. I never bought into this nonsense about Charlo's mental health and just all of that crap. You see how fast the mental health issues dissipate. You see how fast they go away as soon as Canelo is involved.
Mental health, my ass. That's just the trendy thing to say these days.
So you were down in the dumps and you were going through a hard time. Did you go see a psychiatrist, a psychologist? Were you prescribed any medications? Were you diagnosed with anything?
Being down in the dumps is not an illness. It's not a syndrome.
It's life. And everybody's got their own problems. Everybody's got their baggage. In truth, I don't think Charlo stayed out of action as long as he did due to mental health issues, at least not that alone. Jamal was in a situation to where staging fights for him won't bring you any return. No return to the PBC, no return to Showtime. You spend money to do this guy's fights.
What the hell are you going to get out of it? You do a Sulietsky fight. If they would have did that,
they would have spent money to do that. They wouldn't have gotten a return on that fight because nobody wants to see it. A fight they might want to see, like an Andre fight, that's going to be more expensive.
It's going to cost you more money to do it, and you might not be able to get the money back, because what these guys want for a fight,
what Jamal might want for the fight, and Demetrius, it's a lot more expensive than putting on a Sulietsky fight, and that might leave you with no choice but to put it on pay-per-view.
And you don't know that these two can bring you your money back, the money you spend to do the show versus what the show generates.
Now, if it's Canelo he's fighting instead of someone else, well, the financial burden is no burden at all, because Canelo is the top earner in the sport.
They're cashing Jamal out.
Not only will you get back whatever you put in with Canelo, you'll actually make money.
Jermall Charlo, up until this point, was little more than just a depreciating asset.
Depreciating in value. Putting on his fights was going to cost you money, but it wasn't going to make you any. Now, if you stick him in there with Canelo, then you're cooking with rice. He gets to put some money in his pocket, you get to stage a successful pay-per-view, and Canelo has his pick of the litter. It works for everybody, though as far as the fight and the actual fighting,
I think Canelo's gonna knock him out. I think he's cannon fodder. A sacrificial lamb to herald Canelo's new partnership with the PBC.
Canelo and Jermall Charlo are both boxer punchers, but Canelo is a higher tier, a higher grade of boxer puncher with an affinity for counterpunching. For me and my money, a more durable fighter than Jermall Charlo, and certainly more battle-tested.
There's nothing that Jermall Charlo does better than Canelo Alvarez. He's just a taller, longer, rangier fighter, but as far as the fighting and the fundamentals that go into it, there's nothing that Jermall does better than Canelo.
Absolutely nothing. Canelo Alvarez himself describes his current situation as Canelo versus the world. At minimum, it's Canelo versus the PBC's assembly line of fighters, Jermall Charlo among them.
Canelo versus Spence.
There's a feeling that the PBC might want to do that. Added urgency for Terence Crawford to take that fight next month out of the judge's hands, because if he doesn't, there's room for funny business and room for the PBC to stage a Canelo versus Spence fight.
There are some particulars you might want to consider. The loser of the fight has 30 days afterwards to activate their rematch clause.
So in a scenario where you say that Terence Crawford maybe loses a decision or something like that, he'll have 30 days to activate his rematch clause, which would would tie up Spence for at least another fight.
Right.
It's in a scenario where maybe he loses. In a scenario where he wins, I don't think there would be a rematch. I don't think there would be a second fight. I have Terrence Crawford stopping Errol Spence Jr. And if he does, and the prediction sticks, I don't anticipate Errol will activate that rematch clause. I anticipate he'll take some time off, then move up.
And if Canelo's still there, then they'll do the fight.
And that is approximately 2 to 3 fights from now. Canelo is said to have a 3-fight deal with the PBC that extends into the following year.
Looks like the first fight of Canelo's 3-fight deal is going to be Jamal Charlo, then maybe David Benavidez.
If he knocks out Jamal the way I think he's going to knock out Jamal, then maybe he fights David Cinco de Mayo of the following year.
What about this one?
Nothing would surprise me. Now that Canelo Alvarez is on the PBC side of things, that is an added incentive for David to tread carefully and play it safe. We thought that he would be facing David Morrell in the fall. David Benavidez himself blew off that idea.
Talked about that.
You know that it wouldn't surprise me if he sits out the entirety of this year? It wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't come back at all in the fall, because now that Canelo's over there, he wants to make it to that fight, so he wants to play it safe.
Remember that he only fought once all of last year. He only fought once against David Lemieux, then he sat out the rest of the year.
Who says that he won't do the same thing in this one to make it to that Canelo Alvarez fight? Because why would he run risks against a high-risk, low-reward guy like David Morrell, who he already says he isn't fighting?
Doesn't that make that a duck?
It's definitely a duck. It's definitely a textbook duck in my book. A guy with only 9 pro fights has David Benavidez biting his nails and running scared. But that's the situation.
Some monster.
I don't know what David Benavidez is going to do in the fall. He said he wants to fight Munguia, but Munguia himself says that's a fight they might explore next year, not this one. So who's David going to fight in the fall if he fights at all?
I don't know, but Canelo's the priority. Hence Canelo saying it's Canelo versus the world, because in many ways it is.
PBC wants Canelo to fight their entire assembly line of fighters anywhere in between 147, 160, and 168. They've got an entire roster of guys they want him to fight, so they can bill each one of those fights as pay-per-views, successful ones.
What they've always wanted.
Now they've got it, so that entire assembly line of fighters is standing online, single file, waiting to sell their O's, their unbeaten records, to Canelo.
For me and my money, every single one of these fights on that side of things is a more winnable fight than a rematch with Dimitri.
I didn't like his chances in a rematch with Dimitri at either 168 or 175.
I'm not actually broken up that they're not fighting, that there isn't going to be a rematch, though all the same. I didn't favor Canelo to win a second fight with Dimitri, but these fights...
These guys? Jamal, David Benavidez?
Demetrius Andrade, maybe Errol Spence Jr.?
These are far more winnable fights than anything the light heavyweight division has to offer. Canelo has hit his ceiling there, but not at super middle, not at 168.
So bring it on.